This week's show is brought to you by Pretty Easy Podcasts, helping podcasters get their shows off the ground, up and running, and sounding great. Professional podcast production at extremely affordable rates. Do yourself a favor if you're thinking about doing a podcast, but you don't really have a whole lot of time to manage the editing, the posting of the show, and making it sound as good as possible. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com because they'll help you do it at a great rate, and it doesn't matter what your show's about. It could be a sports show, a food show, business. It could be a show about extremely rare birds. Doesn't matter. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com and they'll help you get your show off the ground, up and running and sounding great today. Whatever your passion is, Pretty Easy Podcast is ready to help you enjoy it even more. Everybody has a podcast these days, right? Get in on the fun and go to prettyeasypodcast.com today, or just email them to get started at prettyeasypodcasts@gmail.com. Pretty Easy Podcast, making podcasting, pretty easy.
This is the future. This is not the past.
The new XFL will kick off in 2020.
If you smell what the XFL is cooking.
It's still football, but it's professional football reimagined.
This is our moment, our story to tell. This is history begun.
This is the XFL.
Welcome, football fans. This is the week of April 28th, 2019. This is the road to 2020, and this is the XFL show. I'm Alan.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Bryant.
This week, we're talking significant dates, drafts, training camps, and more football tech. This is episode 66, team number 9. And we have some really fun stuff to talk about. Oliver Luck gave some information at last week's St. Louis press conference with the new coach, Jonathan Hayes. Of course, we had the week from having 2 coaches to having none this week. We kind of saw that coming. It is the NFL draft after all, and we're going to incorporate that into today's program. But busy week for us, Bryant. Lots of stuff on the Patreon we've been getting done, and a lot of focusing on this NFL draft and how it affects the XFL. I'm going to want some unique predictions from both of you on today's episode if you're ready to dive into all that craziness that comes with predicting the future.
It's an interesting concept, Alan, where you say how the NFL affects the XFL, and although they're separate entities, I think every move the NFL makes is going to affect the XFL in some way, starting with the draft. You know, the players going to be taking that the XFL have been looking at. Who doesn't get taken that the XFL can maybe grab? It starts today, where the XFL is watching every move the NFL does, and vice versa, because this is now. This is it. This is the time where the XFL now begins its quote unquote competition with the NFL.
Yeah, we're not science guys, Jake, but I know that every action has an equal or opposite reaction. So this NFL draft, it's huge. Look at 200,000 people in Nashville. Definitely will be affecting the XFL this week.
Yeah, they're going to be putting together a formula, crafting a thesis to see, if it's all going to work out. First of all, how can you count 200,000 people in Nashville? That's what I want to know.
Well, because Roger Goodell was there, and he's going 1, 2, 3, 4 with his finger. He's
did they have like those gates that you got to walk through to get to the subway that would count people, or just people standing there with clickers at the corners of every street?
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, maybe there's got to be some sort of head counter. I don't know. That's not what we're talking about though this week. Maybe on the Patreon, which has been chock full of goodness. If you want extensive NFL draft coverage, it's there. If you want some bonus XFL content, it's there for free. I did a write-up this week. How about that? 6 XFL head coaches so far, and I kind of just gave my quick, really shallow thoughts on each one of them, initial thoughts. And I didn't rank them, though, because I know I'm not allowed to do that yet, Bryant. That's for a future episode, a bonus episode, or a blog
potentially.
Once we get all 8 coaches, I think we'll throw that back up there as a potential bonus episode. Next week, we got to do our bonus episode for the month of, what month are we in right now? April. So that's coming up next week. But yes, Alan, you wrote a free article for everyone to go and check out. Tell your friends about it. Jake's up this week. Jake, are you going to let the cat out of the bag this time, or are you gonna not?
Never. I never let the cat out of the bag.
And don't forget about all the content Vidman putting out there. He has the mock draft that he put up there, and if you're still wondering why a player was taken where, go take a look at that. A lot of great stuff out there, and bonus conversations, Alan, that we've been having. It's been a good time.
We are committed to a long-term vision.
Yeah, it is. We're committed to giving more content for sure. So we did this week, had a lot of fun. And after last week's show and all the Patreon content, lots of great feedback from everybody. All of you great listeners, and of course you patrons on the Patreon. At XFL Show is the social media handle. That's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we got good reaction. Last week we talked about the 2 new head coaches. And we also, got people saying great hires, bad hires, lots of mixed bag with both coaches in New York and St. Louis. At Sean Harrod Show on Kevin Gilbride had an interesting one. Said, I can't like a sucker who Buddy Ryan punched. He is definitely not New York material. And that's referring to Once Upon a Time, yes, the legendary Buddy Ryan did one time cold clock Kevin Gilbride, Jake. So I guess if you're a fan of the Ryans, you probably don't like Kevin Gilbride.
Yeah, you can't please them all. But if that team puts together a winning record, I'm pretty sure everything will be forgotten. Winning solves everything.
It does. You're going to like Kevin Gilbride if you're a New York fan, and he's winning the XFL championship in 2020, I'm sure. Other good stuff on social media this week. At Concept Leagues, cool Twitter has been doing pretty cool work putting out, concept art, I would guess you would call it, of potential XFL team logos and helmets and whatnot. And this week I caught one on Twitter, guys, and I sent you the link. And it's a team for Houston, and he called them the Houston Roughnecks. If you looked at it, I like the name, and I definitely dig the skull with the star in the middle of the forehead. Good job by Concept Leagues. We'll see in a month or so if that's the actual name of the Houston team.
Yeah, my favorite thing is the oil dripping on the shoulders and around the logo. Now, what about this Houston Hurricanes logo? How did this sneak in there?
I don't know, but I'm not for Houston Hurricanes.
I don't think that's what you want to name it.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand Miami, but
you get them there. But the tropical storms are there. They don't get upgraded as much in Houston as they do in other parts of the country. But also, I like originality. Roughnecks is cool. I like this. You're right. The subtle reference to the Oilers is really nice. What'd you think, Bryant, of the Houston Roughnecks concept art?
I mean, the actual art being put together looks really good. I don't think the name is in contention.
You don't like it? No.
It's not that I don't like it. I just don't think it's in contention. So, but it is, and looking at some of these other ones that this Twitter handle Concept Leagues has done. I mean, there's the LA Extreme. He's got the Dallas Toros. There's some pretty cool stuff on here. I like how fans are excited. And I think that's the most important thing you got to take out of this is that people are excited to have this. And they're taking the time to do these things, whether it be for fun or to show off their art skills. But the one I think I like the most is the Tampa Bay Sharks, because I think that was the name of the team on Any Given Sunday, right? Wasn't that Jamie Foxx's team?
Yeah, they were in Miami, but yeah, you're right. That was the Any Given Sunday team, and then I think he at the end of it, spoiler alert for a movie that's 20 years old, didn't he go to? They played in the New Mexico, the new franchise in New Mexico, I think. I don't know, but. No XFL team in New Mexico, but I love the Sharks one. I love the Roughnecks logo. I love the idea that some people are coming up with. But come on, Concept Leagues, give us a Dallas Y'all logo. That's what everybody wants. We want the Dallas Y'all.
I do like the Seattle Stags. I always wanted to go stag to a football game.
I've done it. It's fun. And but Seattle is the Sasquatches, Brian. We've gone over this. Really cool. I want to say, though, every time someone responds to anything from us, or especially from the official XFL League Twitter account, is where I see a lot of it. The things people react to the most are the team logos. That's any coaching announcement that comes out, and all the responses are Okay, but when's the team name and logo coming out? Everybody wants to know the team name and logo, and we just got to be patient because legal battles and whatnot. I don't know if they're battles, but it's securing the rights, I guess, to these names is taking a while. But we're here in maybe a month or so, and we're going to finally get those. Second thing I hear most, Jake, or I see on social media, people responding to the XFL. How about an XFL video game? A lot of gamers out there. Is that maybe it's just because they're on a computer already, and the gamers are always looking to game. But a lot of people asking for an XFL video game. Maybe I would say year 2 or 3.
I think you want to hold off even longer than that. I mean, you need who would make it? Acclaim's out of the game. 989 Sports. I don't think they're around anymore.
I took a couple computer classes back when.
You think you could put one together?
I might put I'll put an 8-bit game for everybody together. Maybe that's what I'll work on this summer for everybody. That'll be my little project for you XFL gamer fans. But thanks for all the interaction on social media at XFL Show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we'll be putting out more content for you through social media as well, where you can see it and react to it there, especially. Or our favorite way to interact with you is to hear you actually respond. Your voice, 724-5654-XFL on the XFL fan line. Love it whenever we get voicemails there. What's up, football freaks? Thanks for listening to this week's show. Just want to tell you what's going on our Patreon page, and we have so much for you there. It is the complete This is the XFL Show experience, because not only do you get this very program commercial-free and potentially a day early, you also get access to bonus shows, monthly bonus shows, full-length bonus shows, bonus content. Sometimes we just turn the microphones on and we have to react to news instantly. We've been doing that a lot more lately. So much fun we're having covering the XFL. And of course, if you love all football, we have the weekly This Is Not the XFL Show for you, where we talk NFL, college football, and everything else pigskin. Especially this week with the NFL Draft. Lots of coverage there on the Patreon. A lot of free articles as well. If you just want to read the blogs, they're there for free on our Patreon page, patreon.com/thisisthe XFL Show. Please give to the Patreon now and get all the football you can handle. Without further ado, it's time to get into some of the news of the week. And we knew it wouldn't be a very busy week in terms of news, but there are a couple of things to talk here in this week's Cover 2.
Going for 2. Go for 2 and the lead.
Starting with technology. I know it makes your head hurt a little bit, Jake. Brian, you love it. You can't get enough of it. And we already talked a little bit about what went down in Austin. Did we mention that the official name of the XFL bringing these tech companies to Texas during the spring league, they called it the X Lab? Did we mention that, Brian? I don't remember talking about the name X Lab.
No, I don't think we ever mentioned X Lab, although it's pretty. I'm sad that we didn't.
Yeah, well, now we are, and it sounds like something out of a Marvel comic book. The X Lab is what the XFL did with all these tech companies that were there for the spring league, and this was via Sport Techie, a great article they put up about all the companies that were there in Austin. And we already talked about one of them. I believe we talked about, I want to say it was Titan GPS with the cool interface they had of locating players. And that's apparently one that the XFL was very impressed with how GPS worked pretty accurately with showing where players were and what they were doing on the field. But according to the Sport Techie article, there were a bunch of different companies there, and they were there for different reasons. So you had athlete performance monitoring and management, and companies that were looking at that. You had Edge 10, Fusion Sport, Kinduct, Kitman Labs, Catapult Sports. These are all focused on the monitoring and management. Then you had Connexon, Wemu Pro, Titan GPS, and they're all about tracking and wearables, which we've talked about a little bit. And then you had companies focused on biomechanics and motion capture tech. And then you had business and communication services, which I'm very interested in. And you had a few companies focusing in on that. And all these companies were brought together into the X Lab. Some of them are competitors. And the XFL said, hey, put your bayonets down and work together. And we want to focus on the future of football. And they challenge these companies to come up with new ideas and how there could be added value to the game and the sport with their technology. And I think it's really cool. And it's crazy to think that the XFL was kind of the mediator for all these companies to get together. This was like a big convention almost, Jake. And who knows, maybe the next great idea probably was born at this meeting in Texas.
Well, it's probably easier for a smaller startup league to attract these other type of businesses, to come there, perhaps almost like pitching, it's kind of like the Shark Tank, the X Lab, perhaps. It would be very difficult for, I'm just going to pick one here. At least I would assume, very difficult for Hawk and Dynamics to get a one-on-one with the NFL league office and try to pitch something that they're working on. But you got a startup league like this. There's really no bad ideas at this event, so that's why they're bringing everybody here.
Yeah, and Hawk and Dynamics, real quick though, isn't that from Stranger Things, Bryant? Isn't that the company? I don't know.
Let's table that for another discussion, maybe on the Patreon. Here's the only thing I think there's a lot of companies on this list, and I understand you want people to work together, but coming from an industry where more brains sometimes equal just more friction, I'm wondering how the partnership went and how everybody seemed to work together, at least what they ended up getting out of it. Could they have gotten more out of it by inviting less of these companies? But
a smaller sample size, you're saying?
I'm not saying smaller sample size, but when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, really you don't make any decisions. Yeah, but understanding that they want as broad of a research as they can, then I get it, and I understand why they did that, and kudos to them for going through the process of actually getting all these things together and making the effort to see what's available out there and how they can improve the game in other ways that maybe some other leagues that tried to launch didn't really look at.
It's really cool, I think, that the XFL was able to get these companies together. Who knows exactly what comes from it, but just the forward thinking is great. And really, that is a huge thing in just all of football. It's why you see companies like Pro Football Focus who do crazy amounts of analytic work that, NFL teams are utilizing this data, and they're all looking for one thing, and that's more measurables on every minute detail when it comes to the game. And that is going to help teams get advantages, but also help fans in fantasy football and maybe add entertainment value. And that's what they were doing with these companies in the XFL's X Lab, looking for measurables on player movement and twitch and cuts on the field. I mean, Jake, imagine if you could put a number to how fast a guy punched from the offensive tackle position. It might make, watching the draft a little bit more exciting, because you could be like, oh, that guy, he beat Ivan Drago's punch on that in Rocky IV. I mean, you could put the number to it. That might make it a little bit more entertaining for the fans.
Do you think this could ever look like the pause screen on a Madden video game, where it's, everybody has numbers next to all their attributes?
Yes, very much so. Especially with how we saw that sneak preview they gave of the Titan GPS interface. That's kind of what it looked like. You got numbers and little graphics everywhere. No partnership was officially announced, but we do know that the XFL, at least social media, tweeted out the Titan GPS look or technology, and that was really cool. But really cool article by Sport Tech. You highly recommend. That's if you're especially a nerd or into tech, read that and think of the future of football. What possibly could happen? That might be that's a Patreon episode right there, Bryant. We will just put on we'll put on foil hats and we'll think of the craziest possibilities in the sport of football when it comes to tech. That sounds like a good bonus episode, a good bonus topic for next month to vote on, at least.
I might have to divert to you in terms of the rundown for that type of episode. But you're right. No partnership officially announced, but the XFL definitely looking to to reimagine the game like we've said in the past, but this time just using any avenue. And you're right. Like, imagine a draft where we don't have to look at like his 40 speed, but rather his, I don't know, like you said, punch speed or something like that. And I find it very interesting, by the way, that you've referenced a 20-year-old movie and a 40-year-old movie in the same episode. But continue.
Okay, what about this? I watch a lot of Black Mirror, so I have a lot of ideas for how the tech could be incorporated. So there's a current reference for you, Brian. Are you happy?
I'm not too familiar with Black Mirror, but that's fine.
Gotta watch it. Very good. Very good on Netflix. All right, part 2 of our cover 2 this week is, the NFL draft is going on. It's actually in round number 3 as we put the show on right now. I got it on here in the background. Round 1 is in the books, and we've talked about how the end of this draft is really going to affect the XFL, but right now let's make some predictions based on what we saw in round number 1 and how round number 1 might affect the XFL, because I think there are all sorts of ways it can, especially if you think outside the box. Jake, if you could come up with one, even it could be kooky, wacky prediction with how the XFL might be affected by the NFL's round 1, the 2019 draft.
Well, I'm glad you said that it could be kooky, because I got the kookiest right here, but I really think it could happen. All right, we all know New York City is, the three of us were there just a couple weeks ago. It's a different world, really never satisfied with their sports teams unless they win the big one. And, to their credit, the New York Football Giants, they have done a pretty good job about that, at least in the past 10 years or so. A lot of people were thinking Dwayne Haskins perhaps getting drafted to the Giants. Of course, he fell down about 10 picks later or something, going to Washington, and the Giants taking Dan Jones from Duke, who apparently looks to be the next in line for whenever Eli says uncle or until he's forced out. So my big prediction is I think we're going to see Eli Manning in the XFL at some point.
Oh,
and that's big star power.
I don't think that's that far-fetched. It makes sense. It makes sense.
Listen, a huge name. Was he a Super Bowl MVP? I can't. Probably.
Yes.
I can't remember that.
And come on, listen. Why are you laughing, Bryant? Eli Manning is at the tail end of his career in the NFL when Daniel Jones, if and when he takes this spot from Eli Manning in New York, is there going to be another NFL team that's going to want to bring Eli Manning in and pay him and, to be a starter? Definitely not. Maybe a backup. Is Eli going to want to be a backup? I don't know. I don't think so. I think he might rather go hang out with his old coach, his old friend, Kevin Gilbride in the XFL. It makes sense. Is it that far-fetched?
Eli's making like $25 million. Why would he want to play for $600?
He is one of the high. That is the big thing. He is one of the highest paid players. He's actually, I think I saw a stat. He's made more money playing in the NFL than any player ever.
Really?
So maybe, cumulative, all the contracts and all the money. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe Eli has made enough, and maybe he's good enough with his money that he's going to say, all right, I'll take a pay cut and just continue to play and help this league. And
maybe he's just doing it for a hobby, just to see what he can do.
Let's sell it to Eli. Eli, think about it. You could be the Lombardi, the Jim Brown,
you could have an award named after
the building block of this league. They could name the championship after you, Eli, if you come to the XFL. Actually, if I'm Eli, I'd make that a stipulation, Jake. I'd say, all right,
you want to have an award named,
all right,
a plaque at the end of the season, giving your name on it.
Gentlemen, we are professionals. Are you wanting to do this fantasy thing this entire episode? This is ridiculous. He's not coming to the XFL ever.
I think it could
What
happen.
are we talking about? Why are we having this conversation about
Never
Eli?
say
That's
never.
the one thing you got out of the first round is that Eli Manning is going to play for the XFL. Really?
It's not that crazy.
Oh my God!
All it takes is a little convincing, and the will of Eli Manning, and we'll see. I like it, Jake. And I would say if I'm Eli, okay, name it the Manning Trophy. No, name it the Eli Trophy, just so people don't think it's Peyton.
I would say Trophy of Eli. If I'm going to play along with this, it's the Trophy of Eli,
and that's the championship. And then I'm Eli, and I'm in the league. I like it. How about you, Bryant? Then, if you're going to make a prediction how round one affects the XFL, how's it not going to be wild?
Here's if the XFL is paying attention. I'm not going to take it so much as a specific player, but if the XFL is paying attention to how the NFL draft took place, and Alan, you're going to like this. It makes a certain position seem less important than any other one, which is the complete opposite of what I think the XFL needs to handle, and that is the wide receiver position. Marquise Brown was the first wide receiver taken in the first round at pick 25, and then we had one, I think, was it N'Keal Harry at 32. Wide receivers are becoming almost not an obsolete position, but something that people are not caring too much about. And Alan, I think you can agree with that statement. But if you go back and look at the AAF, those receivers, they were bad, and not because they couldn't catch the ball. And the XFL needs to take notice that if the NFL is going to start pushing wide receivers down the list because they're not as important, maybe I don't need to really draft a receiver in my top 20. The XFL needs to swoop in and pick some of these up because the better the receivers, the better the quality of the play is going to be.
I think you're coming on to something here, because I don't think it's the wide receiver position is not as important. I think it's really hit, it's peaked in terms of just the way the game's gone. All the college offenses are churning out quality wide receivers, and there's just a huge crop of them for the NFL to choose from, and there are not, generational, as they like to say these days, talents at that position, because it's really hard now to stand out at the wide receiver position, because the rules are such where it's kind of easier to be good at that position now, really. I mean, you've got a lot of the rules are slanted towards that position succeeding more than any other position on the field, I'd say. So it just, I think, opens the door for a lot of good wide receivers to be available to the XFL should they choose to scout properly, which I don't think the AAF did. And there are good wide receivers out there. I don't think there were a bunch of bad receivers, and that's why you saw them go late in the NFL draft. I think you're right. The position is getting watered down, and you need to be like Julio Jones to be, a ridiculous specimen of an athlete to get drafted really high. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of guys who are, fast and have decent hands. And that's like I think a tell is what we saw in the first round. Then you're getting at there, Brian. It's saying, wide receivers might be there for the XFL, and if they can develop them, they can get some good, high quality passing attacks throughout the league, because there are a bunch of great wide receivers in college football these days.
Yeah, exactly, Alan. And there is an importance
the quality of the play
to a lot of the positions. And I think maybe we could even have this discussion on Patreon, is what positions are the most important. Jake, you kind of alluded to who should be your tier one paid player a couple of months back. Maybe we'll repost that for this discussion. But I really feel like if the NFL is, and you're right, maybe it's not so much that the position is becoming obsolete, but the player pool is diluted. The XFL needs to figure out a way to swoop in and get some of these quote unquote diluted players and try to get them over to the XFL, because the AAF, some of these quarterbacks would look a lot better if they had receivers that could actually catch a ball.
Yeah, that was a really odd dynamic, the passing games, but they were coming on there at the end of that league's existence. So it's all about the development and the coaching as well. We know the XFL's doing their damnedest to make sure that's in place. The thing I saw in round one of the NFL draft that might affect the XFL, I'm going to go back to players specifically. You brought up Dwayne Haskins, Jake. He goes to Washington, and they had a guy in place, perennial backup and a guy who got coming off an injury, Colt McCoy. I mean, the way that guy's career is going, I would definitely not be surprised to see him end up in the XFL. injury history now, getting phased out in Washington with Case Keenum and Dwayne Haskins now. It's possible to see that player maybe become someone the XFL could target and pursue. And, okay, this one's very outside the box, Brian. Don't get mad at me, but just picture how beautiful of a story it would be if the comeback of Ryan Shazier ended up happening in the XFL. The Steelers finally replaced him, moving up in the draft to get Devin Bush. And now they, Ryan Shazier, he's moving and running. I mean, he's probably never going to play again, I would bet. I hope he does. But would the NFL be the place he goes right into? Or would it be the XFL? Could you imagine how great that would be for the player and the league?
Everybody wants a feel-good story, and I would want nothing more than Shazier to reinvent, his football career, reignite it in the XFL. That I would never. This is a lot better than the Eli Manning conversation. I'll tell you that much. But
you think this has a better chance than Eli Manning?
I didn't say a better chance. I'm just saying that I would hope that something like this would happen. I mean, obviously, I would hope that the Eli thing happens as well because it's just good for the XFL. But in terms of feel-good stories, a great story of perseverance and comeback, of course, yeah, I would want to see Shazier in the XFL. Again, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the strides that he's making is incredible. Jake, I'm sure you see some of those videos here and there. But for him to ever play again is a long shot, but I'm sure the XFL would welcome him with open arms.
The comfort level that a league would have to have with him to put him on the field after what he endured and has gone through, it would just have to be a ton. Really, even a startup league, someone that's looking to compete with the NFL, you got to be careful. You can't just take a guy that has name value, even though, I don't know, just, what he went through. You don't want to see that ever happen on the field again, and especially not in your league if you say, okay.
Player most likely, or you would bet on, very slim chance any of them ends up in the league, but XFL bound, who'd you bet on? Eli Manning, Colt McCoy, or Gronk?
We've already established that Gronk's probably going to be a sideline reporter and a quote-unquote hype man for the crowd. I think your money's definitely should be on Colt McCoy out of those three.
Yeah, I brought up Eli Manning, but I would say Colt McCoy.
Yep, I'm liking Colt McCoy as well. Let us know who you guys think, you listeners, you football freaks, who you think might end up in the XFL that's in the NFL right now, and how round one or any of the rounds in the NFL draft might affect the XFL directly, because it definitely will. Keep an eye out. We're tomorrow, the end of the NFL draft, really paying close attention to that. And we'll have more on that as well right here on next week's show. Hey, Brainiacs, it's Long Island Iced Tea, and this week's Brainbuster Radio, we are entering the Brainbuster Radio Funhouse. Bray Wyatt debuted a new Mr. Rogers gimmick, and we're going to have a whole lot of fun with it. Plus, we're going to talk the latest cool AEW news. Double or Nothing shaping up to be a wild night in Vegas. New Japan's Best of the Super Juniors is announced, and we know everything that's going to be happening in terms of the card for that big tournament. We talk all the wrestling on Brainbuster Radio, and we've been doing it since day one. Become a Brainiac today and subscribe to the show, Brainbuster Radio, on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast gimmicks. Right now, it's time to get into our main discussion this week, and it's a few tidbits from Oliver Luck and some information that came out on some dates that we should be looking forward to. It's this week's Hot Read.
Blue 58! Blue 58! Go! Hey, Ric Flair! Ric Flair! Pepper, Flip, Caliber.
Motown, happy, jolly, drunk, Buster, Boomer, Tiger. I think he's got a hound too, Rodney, I think. B-19! B-19 is
Hey, Seattle! Ryan! Orange 83!
Okie doke. Mark your calendars, everybody. we've got some dates to look forward to. First up, October, the XFL Draft. Oliver Luck was on the Brian Stoll Show on WGNU in St. Louis during last week's presser. Brian Stoll caught up with Oliver Luck and put out on his radio show some of his conversation. And Oliver Luck said that October is the target month now, which he's kind of said before, but he said it will happen in October. We will be going after a pool of about 600 to 650 players who will, a lot of them, be cut from NFL teams in September. About 850 players get cut from NFL training camps in September. So most of the XFL signings will happen in October in what will be their draft, Jake.
Do we have any specifics on the draft format, or if this is going to be open to the public, anything like that?
Nope, no word on yet if the XFL is going to be taking over some city and cutting down all their trees to to hold a big draft like the NFL did this week.
All right, well, there's always time, but October, you got to think you're going to be a month into the NFL season already, so you're hoping to pick up a lot of the scraps that those clubs did not want on their roster.
Which is why watch the NFL draft and circle some names, because there will be players that get drafted, go to camp, get cut, don't get picked up and put on practice squads, and they will be in the pool of 600 and 650. Brian, it's gonna be awesome to really to really go deep into these draft pools and the veteran pools of players and pick out who might be XFL bound come September. We're gonna kind of have like a whole month to look and speculate at names.
It's interesting because before, players when they were cut had really no choice either to not play or get on a practice squad. Well, now they have a second chance. They have another choice, right? And they can join the XFL. Some of these, be careful with the word scraps, Jake, because I feel like I don't want to say they're scraps. A lot of these players will make the team because these are high caliber football players. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
So to say that they're team scraps, it just means they didn't fit the team's mold. These could be elite players in the XFL, given regular playing time, given some good coaching, the patience that the XFL will probably show something that the NFL won't be showing.
Yeah, let's just call them the runner-ups. Maybe that's a little more.
They called Kurt Warner the scraps once upon a time. Jake, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Remember that in September and October when we get to this XFL draft.
The draft is the most exciting piece of this because I assume it's going to be some sort of snake draft. You're going to have to. But the way the tiers work as well, it's going to be an interesting thing. And then we got another, development that we're about to talk about that is going to be interesting because you're going to have a lot of leftover players too, it sounds like.
You're going to have 40 of them because Oliver Luck revealed that there will be a Team 9 in the league. Team 9 is basically the practice squad of the entire league, or the developmental team, or the G League, as Oliver Luck put it, referencing the NBA developmental league. So there will be 40 players on a team that practices in Dallas every day, just like all the other teams. It'll be a team of 40 players that have their own coaches. They just will not be playing as one of the 8 XFL teams because this is a practice team. This is a team full of reserve players, and this team is being created, Team 9, because injuries happen. And you also want to develop players. So to have that, they have one team for all the other 8 teams to pick off of in case of injury throughout the season. And that'll involve waivers and, an order for which you get to pick and choose players. But it makes a lot of sense, and it's what they did in NFL Europe when Oliver Luck was in charge over there.
Jake, how about you go first? Because I'm gonna tear this apart a little bit. Go ahead, Jake.
Well, I don't think I really have much more to say about it other than what I said already.
It makes sense. You need reserves.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's not so much a 9th team, but I don't think the XFL wants to worry about having to find players if they're not on a active roster. They're going to want to pull a reserve, something the AAF really didn't have, right? The AAF was, you talk about horror stories. I forget what the name of the gentleman was that signed the day before the league went defunct. That's what the AAF was doing. They were going out and signing these players based on, regional drafts and all that stuff. The XFL wants to have that pool of players available, especially at the beginning of the year before the NFL players need all these injured reserves and things like that. If you tie up these players on contracts and say, hey, I'll give you $200,000 or whatever the contract may be, if you just stick with me through the end of the season, that's what the XFL is doing. They're gonna hedge their bet a little bit. They're gonna get more players than what they need because injuries happen, substitutions are gonna happen, players are not gonna work out the way you thought, and you're gonna have to hope that those players didn't go to the NFL because they didn't make an XFL. So that's almost like the opposite, right? They didn't make an XFL roster. Well, hey, maybe they're going to be on a practice squad of the NFL instead.
So you think that the XFL, they're just basically paying them to stay in shape and be in reserve in case they're needed, rather than losing that talent and another league possibly picking them up, hurting the quality of their play?
Exactly. I think the XFL is, like I said, hedging their bet. They're going to get more players than they need, and they're going to want to pull players that are available that, one, they know is always going to be there. They're not going to lose them to the NFL. They're going to be in shape, and they're going to be ready to play, and they're going to be up to date with the XFL rules. Not someone coming in not knowing that, hey, you threw the ball below, 3 times before the line of scrimmage. That's a penalty. I'm just going to stop trying. They have to know how the XFL works. So I think that's where the XFL is really doing with this more so than anything else.
Every league needs reserves.
Just the quality of the play.
And you need to have players that are ready to play in your league with your rules. You need to have players that are being developed as well, because this Team 9 is also probably going to feature some players that graduate to the main rosters of the other 8 teams. It's also its own mini minor league, but it's called Team 9. And that makes sense. They've done it already in NFL Europe, so it's a good idea, I think, from Oliver Luck. I just want to know if I'm going to be able to get a Team 9 jersey. That's my team. On a Team 9 jersey or shirt.
Do you think it'll just be like a black silhouette of a generic-looking football player will be their logo?
But this makes all the sense in the world, and it's going to be interesting, though, to see what they get paid. Do you think that the regular XFL salary structure is going to apply to Team 9 players? We'll have to see. I would assume so.
Alan, do you think they're going to play at the Star in Frisco?
Their practice facility is the same practice facility as the Dallas XFL team.
Oh, so. Okay. It would have been great if they played where the AAF was supposed to have their championship games.
Yeah. Our last bit here on the Hot Read to mark your calendar for January. So when Team 9 and the other 8 teams get put together in October, we'll have our teams. They will commence practice in the fall, as Oliver Luck has said in the past. And per Howard Balzer on Twitter, XFL training camp will take place in January in Houston. And this is going to be 17 days of joint practices of all 8, or I guess 9 XFL teams. And think of it more as a preseason. The AAF did something similar with a 2-week training camp, but let's hope we get some formal preseason matchups and games between the teams in these 2 weeks. And the good thing is also these teams will be practicing before training camp in January, Jake.
Yeah, but is it still enough time? And if the answer is no, how do you give them more time?
Well, the draft is in October, Jake. So that's October.
Yeah.
So that's November, December.
You're drafting October. You're and practicing in late October and start November.
But training. You're saying training camps for these.
I think training camp's a bad word. I think I think preseason scrimmage. Type of scenario is what this is.
Think of it more as a preseason, because there will be practices before the combined training camp, so that the teams will have continuity amongst themselves, and then they're going to go in and have the real thing against the other teams for 17 days or so in January. And it's a preseason, and that is totally enough time, because that mimics what you got in the NFL. You got the summer for training camp for your practices with just your team, and you've got August with your preseason, which is a little bit more than 17 days, but it's about the same deal here, Jake. So I think there is enough time if that's your main question for sure.
Right. Yeah, I think training camp throws it off. I think that's the most recognizable word, which is why they're calling it training camp. But training camp's really the practice that's going on before this. I think this is more of a, like Alan said, a preseason exhibition, scrimmages, live action against a different opponent, testing out your plays, things like that. It's not so much just, hey, because you're talking about bringing 8 teams together, possibly 9. That's going to be that's a preseason. You don't have practices with 9 teams. At that point, you're in competition mode.
Yeah, and it also feels like, I mean, we didn't get the word on if the individual, the team practices will be open to the public, but I have to feel that XFL training camp will be open at least to the media in January and hopefully to the entire public, because that'd be a cool trip to Houston in January. Jake, I know that there might be another trip you might be planning in Houston in the month of January, so it might coincide with the XFL training camp. All 8 teams in one city, but before January, before October, we do need 2 more head coaches. Jim Mora Jr., Iho de Jim Mora coming in LA maybe next week, Bryant?
Is that a rumor that's out there? Because I have not heard that. Is that something that's seriously out there?
I'm totally making it up. I'm
trying to get the ball rolling.
I'm just trying to get someone to bite. I don't know. I'm hoping it's Jim Mora Jr. or someone with name recognition like that. He'd be good. One more chance. Before I was saying no Jim Mora Jr., but the more I think about it, Brian, I'm with you. I want him to get the job just because I know you'd be happy.
Look, I'm a UCLA guy, like I've said in the past. For those reasons, I'm not very happy. But I think in terms of the market, LA, to have Jim Mora Jr., he's recognizable. Oh, man, it would be a great get for the XFL. Why wouldn't you want him? I can tell you I'll tell you one thing. It's better than some of the other names that were thrown out earlier this week by certain NFL insiders.
You mean Jeff Fisher, master tweeter Jeff Fisher.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it would be a little bit better. I'm still sticking with my prediction of Marv Levy, Jake. That's my prediction for this week. No, I don't know. I have no earthly clue. But Jake, next week, you think we'll have another coach? What are your expectations? The NFL draft's come and gone. The NFL's gonna go away from the news cycle now for a while.
Yeah, they are. I don't know.
Are they? OTAs just started.
Well, this is the dead area. This after the draft, it gets dead.
For the dead area for the NFL is like dead area is like don't know. No.
I think it's a 50-50 that we're going to get a coach.
So the NFL right now goes through this little dead period, but there's tons of news. All these rookies are going to get signed. There's plenty of. You don't think the New York media market's going to bash the Giants when they sign their first round pick Daniel Jones? I mean, come on, that's going to be like cover the stories for a week.
No, but the NFL is not going to have anything close to what how big the draft is until like July, and camps get going, because New York market they can only bash Dave Gettleman so much. They're going to switch over and focus on the Knicks getting Kevin Durant or something, and there's going to be this dead period. There's always a dead period between after the draft and July in the NFL. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for the XFL to make some big announcements like TV deals, jerseys, team names, all of that. That's all coming up. These months are going to be really, really busy, I think, the next 2 months for the XFL, but maybe not next week. I think we're going to have another relaxed week next week.
Another one, you think?
One more, yes. And then maybe we'll get another coach.
All hands on deck after that.
Oh, yeah, especially with
colors, logos, television rights.
Maybe a president next week.
Yeah, we need some presidents.
That's light and airy. We could take a president. We only have, 4 right now? 5? Who do we have?
We've got a president in Seattle, L.A., New York, Tampa. Did we get one in Tampa? I think we got one in Tampa.
Washington, D.C. No, we didn't get one in Tampa.
Oh,
D.C.
we got D.C. Okay. So
I think we're 4. We're halfway there.
Yeah. With the presidents and 2 coaches to go and a whole bunch of news to come out. I'm looking forward most, though, to those dates we talked about. October, the players, and training camp in January. Exciting stuff. Everybody, thank you for listening. Remember, subscribe to the podcast. This is the XFL Show. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, any podcast platform you prefer. We're there. And just hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends if they're football freaks, this is the show for them. And, of course, the Patreon is just jacked up, lit, as the cool kids say, full of content. XFL and even non-XFL football talk all over there. All the football talk you can handle. Anything left to say, Brian?
It's been a great week with the draft. The XFL's going to start turning out content. I'm ready. Strap your seatbelts. What is it? Strap your seatbelts, ladies and gents. We're in it. It's gonna be a great summer.
I fastened my seatbelt. Yeah,
is that what it is? I don't know. Sure.
Click it or ticket.
Click it or ticket.
Yeah,
that's what it's.
At least in these parts.
Don't fall asleep on airplanes, is what I've heard.
Yeah, you got anything, Jake, besides PSAs?
I can't be click it or ticket. I'm sorry. I peaked.
All right. Well, I just want to say, Eli, if you're listening, think about it. The XFL could be a league molded in your image and your chance to break out from the shadow of your brother Peyton. Think about it while that kid Daniel Jones tries to take your job. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. For Bryant, for Jake, I'm Alan. This is the XFL Show. Remember, they're listening.